David Payne was not just a friend. He was part of something much more intimate and far more dangerous. Today we will unveil the family secret that connects Payne to the McCanns, and that might explain why, to this day, no one has dared to touch this silent bond. A tape, one of those discreet, colorless ones, carefully wrapped but not for decoration, for sealing, like someone closing a box that should never be opened. At first glance, it doesn't seem like much, but sometimes it's exactly what doesn't draw attention that holds everything together. That's how it was with him. David Payne was never the center of attention. In every image of that group, he's there, quiet, present, like someone just tagging along. But when you look closely, you realize he wasn't with them, he was among them. In that group that dined together, that took turns checking on the kids, that moved through the night as if everything was under control, Payne was more than just a part. He was the axis. He was the one who organized the schedules, who coordinated the dinners. He was the one who stopped by to check on Madeline that afternoon when everything fell apart. And he was the one who was never truly questioned. The cameras always show the same thing. Jerry McCann, Kate McCann, and David. They're close enough to hear any whisper, close enough to never have to answer anything. And when someone is always there but never questioned, something is wrong. It's not what he said, it's what no one had the courage to ask. Behind a child's disappearance, there's more than a tragedy. There's a pact, the kind of agreement that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. It forms in the gaze of those who share the same guilt or the same fear. Payne was in that gaze, in the McCanns' silence, in the media's silence, in the police's silence, because sometimes the most protected isn't the one who suffered the most. It's the one who couldn't be exposed, and the public felt it. Those who followed from the beginning know something doesn't fit, like there's an empty space, a piece that was never placed on the board. This video is about that piece. Today you'll see what that bond was hiding. The kind of tie that looks like friendship, but binds much more than affection. If you've always had that strange feeling seeing Payne there on the sidelines, never pressed, maybe now is the time to pull that thread. If this has already stirred something in you, if this lack of questions bothers you, subscribe now. Because what comes next isn't light, but it might be what you've been missing to understand what was wrong all along. On that trip, everything seemed like a well-coordinated routine. The tapas group, as they became known, was made up of close friends, many of them doctors, respected professionals, people you'd look at and expect nothing out of place. Every night, the same ritual, dining together at the resort's restaurant, while the children slept in the apartments. David Payne was the organizer. Not only did he help plan the trip, he was the point of balance. He was the one who assigned the turns to check on the kids. He was the one who kept track of the schedules, who kept everyone aligned. While others came and went, he stayed at the center, connecting all sides like an invisible knot. And it was exactly that position that made him untouchable. That afternoon of the disappearance, Payne was the only one who entered the McCanns' apartment before the tragedy. He said it was just a quick visit, just to see how everything was. But there's no precise record of the conversation he had with Kate. No camera, no timer, just loose words, memories, and silence. Have you ever noticed that some people never have to explain anything? In the statements, he's always mentioned casually. He was there. He was the one who called us. He was the one who knew the schedules. No one found his presence odd, because he was always there. But constant presence sometimes hides involvement. And when a witness reported months later hearing strange comments made by Payne on another trip about children, about uncomfortable situations, it didn't make headlines. It didn't spark an investigation. It became a footnote, as if something within that group said, "Don't touch this." And that's where the tension begins, because Payne wasn't just the close friend. He was the thread that tied everything together. Little by little, what seemed like mere friendship reveals itself as something else, a selective trust, loaded with conveniences. Payne wasn't the type to appear much in the media. While Jerry and Kate faced the cameras, he stepped back. No interviews, no statements, no need to justify himself. And that was never seen as strange, because somehow he was already protected. This kind of protection has a name. Psychology calls it a silent alliance. It's when a group, even without planning, decides to maintain stability. Even if it means ignoring uncomfortable signs, even if someone carries more than they seem, Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's a choice, it's a shield. And when you combine that with the conformity effect, that impulse, that makes everyone follow the group, even when they sense something's wrong. What emerges is what's called a status friendship, a bond that doesn't break, because tampering with it destabilizes everything. If David knew too much and still no one confronted him, what exactly were they protecting? That's the kind of question that's hung in the air for years, because no one wanted to pull that thread. No one wanted to be the first to say there's something strange here, even when the statements didn't add up, even when the versions changed, even when anonymous witnesses said deep down they always found Payne unsettling. And here comes the micro-climax of this part. Sometimes the weakest link is the most protected, because it's the one holding the rope. And if that link falls, the whole web unravels. Now think with me, if the police knew this, if the friends felt this, if the public sensed this, why did no one do anything? Maybe the answer lies in what seems most innocent: the bond, the tape carefully tied, the presence that never raises suspicion. But every tape hides what's inside the box. It was in a report buried among so many forgotten papers that the first crack appeared. A doctor, a colleague of Payne's, reported, years later, an uncomfortable conversation. She said that during a previous trip with the group she heard Payne making jokes. That didn't feel like jokes. Comments about bathing the children, phrases that made the air heavy, even if no one had the courage to react at the time. She reported it, signed it, delivered what she saw, and still, nothing changed. The police received the complaint but never formalized an investigation. The group, the same ones who shared dinners and alternating nights, didn't react. They chose silence, and that silence there weighed more than any words. It must be a misunderstanding. He's always been a joker. No point stirring this up now. Those were the phrases said behind the scenes. No one recorded them, no one confirmed them, but they were there, in the subtext of every statement. An invisible wall rose around Payne, as if protecting him was in fact protecting themselves, because touching that bond meant pulling the thread of the group's entire trust. And that's when the pattern became clear. People like David Payne, central, discreet, too perfect figures, have been shielded before. In Jonestown, Jim Jones was just a pastor. With Epstein, he was just an investor friend to all. And in both cases, when the truth exploded, those who stayed silent were swallowed up too. In the McCanns case, the explosion never came, but the unease, that never stopped pulsing. If you look closely at the investigation records, something will bother you. It's not what's there, it's what never showed up. David Payne was never deeply questioned. His versions were never publicly challenged, even with the doctor's complaint, even with scattered reports of unease from other witnesses. He remained out of focus, untouched. In one of the documents, there's a discreet note. Payne actively participated in organizing the child monitoring shifts. That's not just logistics, it's strategic positioning. He knew where each child was, when they slept, who was checking which apartment and at what time. He controlled the rhythm, like an invisible conductor, and still, no one ever pressed his tempo. If you put the pieces together, the solo visit to the McCanns' apartment, the jokes from the earlier trip, the group's silence, the lack of interrogation, a question emerges that's frightening. Why protect someone if there's nothing to hide? And maybe that question is so unsettling because the answer lies in what no one wants to say out loud. It wasn't just about protecting David. It was fear of unraveling what the group represented. It was fear that pulling that thread would make the friendship collapse, the image of perfect families crumble, and the truth that everyone felt in their gut finally take shape. And what's most frightening is that maybe they didn't even need to plan it. Maybe it was automatic, instinctive, as if the whole group knew deep down they couldn't let him fall. And when no one dares to break a bond, it's because there's so much more tied up in it. Some things don't scream, but their silence burns inside. And that's when we understand the most dangerous thing isn't what was said. It's what was kept hidden among people who looked at each other and already knew. In the end, what remains isn't what was said out loud, but what no one ever needed to say. It's the kind of silence that only exists when everyone already understands what must and must not. In the images, in the reports by the McCanns side, always close, always in the background, a restrained smile, a discreet gesture. Nothing too much, but also nothing too little. And that in itself should have raised the alarm. The bond between them wasn't just friendship, it was collective survival. That visit of his to the McCanns' apartment shortly before the disappearance was never convincingly explained. Payne went in, said he saw the twins sleeping, that everything seemed calm, but he didn't mention Maddie. No details, no certainty, a void of silence in the middle of such a meticulously organized routine. And when that void appeared, no one wanted to look inside. No one asked, "Why did you go there alone, David?" Not the police, not the group, not the press. Because asking that question meant opening what was behind it. And what was behind it was more uncomfortable than any answer. It wasn't about Payne having done something. It was about him knowing too much. Being in every decision, every conversation, behind the scenes, in the foreground, in the background, always there without ever being the focus, like a tightly tied bond that no one dared to loosen. The group's actions after that speak louder than any statement. The doctor who reported Payne's suspicious comments? Ignored. The uncomfortable accounts from other witnesses? Dismissed. The questions that arose in forums, behind the scenes, among alternative investigators? All treated as exaggeration. As if suspecting was worse than what actually happened. And that says everything. Because in circles like this, where image is everything, where the fear of scandal outweighs the duty to truth, silence becomes a pact. A collective code that says protect what's left. Even if what's left is just appearances, Payne became a symbol of this. A reflection of so many other bonds that form around uncomfortable truths. Bonds not made of affection, but of convenience, of fear, of necessity. It was easier to keep everything as it was, to pretend that thread was just friendship, but it wasn't. When you look closely, you realize the bond was never gentle. It was tight, bound, tense. It didn't hold affection. It held silence, and that's where the shock comes. The silence, in this case, was a choice, not an omission. The group chose not to speak, chose not to look, and in doing so, they shielded Payne, not for him, but for themselves, because if he fell, everyone else would come down with him. Breaking that thread isn't betrayal, it's moral survival. And even if justice never broke it, those who look now with sharper eyes start to pull. Every time you question, every time you feel the unease, that bond loosens a little, and maybe, just maybe, the only justice possible now is this: refusing to pretend you didn't. Say, when you feel something's wrong but no one else seems to notice, it weighs. It's that feeling of being the only one awake in a room full of sleeping people. And in this case, the silent bond was there all along, but no one pointed it out. The real answer wasn't in the documents or the statements. It was in the collective behavior, in the way everyone around Payne chose to close their eyes. And when so many close their eyes together, the one who opens them seems strange, but not anymore. Today, looking is an act of courage. It's a way to break what was made to never be touched. How many other bonds like this still exist out there, tied between polite smiles and uncomfortable silences? Maybe we'll never know them all, but knowing this one changes everything. In the end, it wasn't the absence of proof. It was the presence of silence. It wasn't the lack of evidence. It was the excess of convenience. You know that tape that seems like just a decoration, an insignificant detail, the one that wraps around a box, discreet, almost invisible, throughout. This video, we've been pulling that thread, carefully, with doubt, with fear even. And now, looking closely, you can see that tape wasn't decorative. It was what held everything together. It bound what no one could touch, what wasn't said out loud, what was there all along, but seemed harmless because it came from someone always smiling on the right side of the scene. David Payne didn't need to disappear or raise suspicion. He just needed to be there, quiet enough, close enough, but out of focus, and that was enough. Enough for the truth to stay trapped. Enough for even after everything, no one dared to ask the question that still echoes. Why was he never pressed? I've heard it a lot. But there's no proof against him. Maybe. But the real question was never about what he did. The question is, why did someone with so many uncomfortable glances around him managed to go through all this as if he were just another innocent friend? The answer lies in the bond. And the bond wasn't one of affection. It was one of protection. Something bothers me deeply about this case. It's not the mystery of that night or the police's failures. It's the way everyone around seemed to know what couldn't be said, the synchronicity with which they looked away, as if everyone knew that to keep up the facade, they had to protect the weakest point, which, ironically, was also the most dangerous. They didn't protect Payne because he was the most trustworthy. They protected him because they knew if someone pulled his thread, the whole box would come apart. And even today, most people keep avoiding that thread. They keep pretending the tape is just a pretty friendship bow, that the silence was casual, that nothing more can be done, but it can. Because silence doesn't hold when someone starts to speak. And sometimes all a case like this needs is one person who refuses to pretend they didn't see. If you've made it this far, it's because something bothered you too. Maybe his look in the images, or the lack of answers. Maybe that tightness in your chest when someone smiles too much, but you know something doesn't fit. And if it hurt, it's because it still matters. Maybe the greatest justice possible now isn't legal. It's emotional. It's naming what was hidden. It's tearing that bond even quietly and saying, just because no one speaks doesn't mean I didn't feel it. That's what we're doing here. And it's not a small thing. I break the silence. If you felt this too, if this story hit you in some way, the super chat here isn't just financial support. It's symbolic. It's your way of saying, I was here. I pulled that thread too. It's a simple gesture, but it carries weight. Because those who send a super chat here aren't just viewers. They're part of this story, part of this resistance. And if this video was just the beginning, the next one will be a punch from another angle. Because if now we've understood who was tied in this bond, in the next one we'll see who was holding the ends behind it. It'll be even harder to pretend none of this matters. So, if this truly touched you, if this thread pulled something inside, you that you didn't know was there, don't let it pass. Click to subscribe. This isn't just a channel. It's a way to break silent pacts one by one. And if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be said with conviction, even in the dark. Now, I want to know what this stirred in you. Which part hit hardest? Which silence felt like it was yours too? Write it down. Even if it's just one sentence, it can be a whisper, it can be anger, it can be doubt, but let it be real. I'll read every single one, because here, what matters most isn't the comment itself. It's what you had to feel to write it. If you want to leave your mark, write, I break the silence. And if it hurt, even in silence, it's because there's still something that needs to be said. And here, we don't turn away. We pull the thread. Not every silence is forgetting.